Everything that lives is designed to
And
end.
off we go.
We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
So fortunately, but I guess unfortunately
Is
at
this a
that, we
curse?
have like
Or some
four and
kind
a
of
half minutes or
punishment?
so in this very beginning
I often think about the
of,
God who blessed us with this
I guess you
gift of
can call it an
reason,
auto-scroller.
and
There's
wonder
nothing
if we'll ever
we can
have the
really do
chance
to
to
make the
kill him.
first 4 minutes or so go by quickly, but we will at least be good for some of the tech that we use for the first 15 minutes or so. The first 15 minutes of the game is the prologue, and it's hyper condensed with a good amount of stuff.
We've passed the 50-kilometer threshold and are proceeding toward the target.
And maybe we'll see some new tech. I don't know. I don't know if Fullest or Marbles have been practicing some of the new tech that we found in Prologue. I believe Wusheng found a little bit of a time save, but it's still unsure on if either of these runners will use that time save to their benefit tonight.
Origin point of long-range lasers confirmed.
Most runs do last for about an hour and a half in loadless time, as both runners here are sporting two different specs to their PCs, and at least loadless time makes it a fair playing field for both runners.
Requesting permission to engage. Permission granted.
But nothing really to say here in these first opening minutes here. Just a matter of optimization for each of these flying waves. We will be transitioning to different perspectives and different views throughout the rest of the game, and you'll see, wow, both runners actually going for a AI manip from what it looks like. Fullest not going all the way to the right-hand side of the screen, but Marvel's also going. Not too certain on which runner benefited the most from that technique there. Pushing their ally to the side usually enables them to shoot down 3 of the flyers that we would have to kill. Instead, our ally takes it out for us, but sometimes it's not always all that consistent. At least for me. I know that from my perspective, it's not exactly the most consistent, but I think these guys have it down a little bit more than I do.
4B down.
But for those of you who have never seen NieR Automata, you can definitely see sort of hints at the different perspective changes, and we'll see those happen more often in the run itself once we actually transition to 3D combat. But you can really see how the game puts the player in sort of these different perspectives, changing the camera angle that you look at the character, but not necessarily the controls. The controls transition quite nicely between each of these perspectives. But again, mostly just trying to take these waves out as quickly as possible. We'll get a chance to see what the crash time is for both of these runners, but either way should be almost identical. Fullest pulling ahead by about a second or so, second and a half. 423 crash and 425 crash for MarbleSoda. Although that could very easily swing in Fullest's into Fullest's court very easily, because Prologue is quite dense in terms of the tech, and it really comes down to whose muscle memory is better for Prologue, and just sort of the different strategies that people do. But primarily, the damage that we'll be doing is done conveniently by one of the weapon sets that the game provides us with. The heavy sword on light attack and short sword on heavy attack. That weapon set actually enables us to do a dash attack or a dash move, and then a couple frames later do a heavy attack that conveniently actually throws out a sword that deals about 4.5 times damage. Very convenient, yes, I know. And especially in prologue and elsewhere in the run, we really do make sure that we're using that the entire way through. All the combat is that, and it's rather difficult to do, I guess, consistently. With the number of tricks that we end up throwing in, it's very layered, but it's also very nice as well. We got a chance to see there a little bit of movement tech out of crane skip from both runners, not opting to do some of the newer strategies that we've seen in our Discord. But Marble's ever so slightly ahead of Fullest. I'm quite surprised going into Silo 2 here. Both runners actually making use of a slowdown effect that they get from charging up a cooldown ability from their little robot firing over their shoulder. But coming up here just outside of this silo, both runners do have to do a pretty long or high jump exiting Silo 2 at basically the same time. Let's see who gets bridge skip first. Both runners get it at the same time, essentially, Marbles. Yeah, it didn't look like he plunged after. But the chasm of that bridge area was an incredibly high. Of course, navigating the lava.
I know.
Almost conveniently out of bounds, some would say. Fullest having a little bit of difficulty on those medium vibe. Passes out, but 3 ability in enemies as possible with it. Just a little bit difficult for me to. But I think both players to go for a pretty quick kill on some of these waves here with the laser. Fullest coming out ahead of Marbles in Silo 3. Here, oof. Both runners attempting to do some swag here. Fullest unfortunately lost a little bit of time. Marbles making up that time. Conveniently, you don't actually have to go through the.
I guess even they get bad intel from time to time, huh?
And you can actually just lift and go all the way up and over.
Alert. High power jamming detected. No
Because reasons.
Doesn't matter. I'll just take him out.
So both runners here, I didn't get a chance to see there, but I think both runners opting to up there, which is a nice little time save there, but it looks like Fullest lost a little. Get enough damage onto the boss, so that is going to put Fullest up back a couple seconds here in comparison to Marbles. This is quite close. Going into the first little bit of RNG in Prologue. Although, I wouldn't really say the first bit of RNG. A lot of it, in terms of enemy placements, is RNG. Or enemy behaviors, let's say. And this comes down to the attack RNG of angles, essentially, where we're just waiting for the trigger. But once that music trigger hits, it is up to RNG for angles to not give us a horrible attack known as punches. And I'm really sorry if my connection is poopy, because I've been having connection issues for the longest of time, so my voice might be robot-y at times. Do beware of that.
This is the target. I'm going to destroy it.
Right. I'll provide
That might just be my connection to Discord in that.
Alert. Incoming enemy attack from below.
Wow. Wowee. I'm quite surprised at that. But Engels has chosen the rest of Fullest prologue here. In prologue is about a second time loss. I forget exactly how much, but it is a significant time loss in this sort of setting where both runners are basically neck and neck, but those 23 seconds can really put the other person ahead super, super far. And as May has pointed out, both runners going on the right pipe. I'm not too sure how I feel about this. I should just, you know, like, I don't know. I might be done. I don't know. I'm a left piper, and I don't condone this right pipe usage. For a second there, Fullest being on the wrong weapon set. Poor decision from him, and he messed up the double lift. That's gonna cost time. Marbles ever so closer, and doing a lift. Losing time every being that double lift on there, though not very optimal, but still catching up to Fullest here. That was an okay ninjas from Fullest, but we'll see if Marbles has any better luck. I know both runners do this a little bit differently. That was a nice first laser from Marbles, killing all 4 of those stubbies very quickly, and then the 2 dropping in very nicely. If anything, only a couple seconds is the difference here between these 2 runners.
I didn't know the machines had that kind of intelligence.
But yes, I do apologize for my connection. It's not exactly the greatest.
The control on the enemy's upper arm. Use your pod. Should be able to take it over.
I told you to shut up!
This, we should be seeing another instance of RNG where Engels' attack and the dialogue of 2B and 9S should basically line up so that way it smoothly transitions, although Engels is not always a nice boy.
See this control system.
Affirmative. Infiltrating enemy subunit. Behavior table adjusted. Balance controls overridden. Enemy unit subjugation complete.
Here in prologue. Unfortunately, my connection is putting me a little bit behind, but the 1430 prologue out of Fullest is still very nice, although Marbles does have a lot of ground to catch up with a 1454 prologue. He does need that time that he lost in from Punch's RNG to be made up. Either that or Fullest needs to continue to mess. Smile. So ahead of us in the bunker is really just a matter of mashing through
All right.
stuff here,
I could. Okay, once you're.
and it is quite easy to actually mess it up.
Morning.
Night.
That. Oh. The.
Nice.
Huh?
There's
Oh.
Moving from the bunker into the main sort of overworld, it does sort of introduce for myself as well. We have run into a good number of
That means
frame
we need
issues.
flight units, huh? Better head for the hangar. Usually we can't get near flight units. They're way too expensive.
Or seemingly
for
just
us.
inconsistent,
Too
especially
bad
when
they
it
can't
transitions
mass-produce
into
these
the
things yet.
overworld. But not much to really say here. Fullest sort of rocketing ahead in between these sections here, although both runners, it looks like, opted to do
Why
the
do you think they sent a combat model like you to a recon job? If all they
dialogue
wanted
skip
intel
in
with
front of
scanner
the
models are built
saving
for that kind of thing.
transporters.
All right, all right.
So that saved them a little bit of time as opposed to just hitting the dialogue and
2B, you're going to have some new
opting
weaponry
to
installed from here on out. I'll put
sit
instructions
through it.
for you.
Interesting strategy from Fullest. I'm surprised he didn't use a pod program. That might have been a weird decision from him, but nevertheless. Each runner has their own strategies, although I'm not too certain on how fast that was in comparison. We all do this sort of differently, as we might see. One thing to definitely look out for there in this shmup is those two fidget spinners there that Fullest got a chance to take out, as well as marbles, where they're both basically aiming to hope that they don't spin, because for whatever reason, when they do actually spin, your attacks just get eaten up pretty quickly, and it's very difficult to actually have a good amount of damage put on them, but Marble's not getting any spinning either, which is very nice. Now, what I was alluding to earlier in terms of frame drops, we might see this on Fullest's perspective. I know last night he was having a little bit of difficulty,
Proposal. Proceed to target location.
and I know it seemingly more and more my game seems to do the same in terms of frame drops. Of course, in this game, our inputs are directly tied to when a frame is actually made, and when and if that frame is dropped, then our input is actually dropped. Which is quite unfortunate for us, because with the amount of things that we do very quickly, we do not want any dropped frames, and overall having the game run slower is not very fun,
So this is the resistance
nor very fun to look at.
Probably go talk to their leader first thing.
But both runners making their way into the resistance camp area. They're going to be looking to do these couple side quests here. Basically mandatory as per the main quest. But we do just go around the city ruins and collect the items that we need. One of them is a little bit of RNG, but not too much. Although both of these runners should be pretty solid on their movement here.
How's the weather on Earth today?
It's relatively easy to mess up some of this, because given how fast both of these runners are, it's really just a matter of time before Marbles gets back into his groove here, and makes up some of the time that he's lost to Fullest, but not necessarily that far behind, I do have to add.
Wonder if there are any huge boars and such.
But we'll be seeing some of this routing again later, as in different scenarios we actually do cross through some of these same areas, but Fullest losing track of some of those items is not really what he was looking to do there. Of course, you do only need to take out 3 of those enemies, but sometimes the game places those enemies in sort of awkward positions in the map, so
no, I don't think they're a pain.
it's a little bit difficult to know exactly where those enemies are going to be or where they're going to drop their items. It's very easy to lose track of them. The medium biped giving Marbles a little bit of issues there, but I believe both runners took out more enemies than they probably should have, but I can understand the nerves when racing like this. Now, one thing that is worth mentioning is that Fullest upgraded his short sword. That's going to enable him a little bit of faster movement speed, as we now see him doing, instead of a dash punch, he's now doing a dash swing with his sword. That's going to be very marginally faster than some of the movement he was doing beforehand, and overall saving ever so slight milliseconds between each of these individual ones. However, he does need to make sure that he doesn't mess any of them up, because if he does, then he basically loses the amount of time that he had gained from the previous like 3 or 5 dash swings. So he does need to be careful of that, although I'm confident in Fullest's ability to not mess that up necessarily. It's more about how well his beelines through these areas can be in comparison to Marbles. I know Marbles has had a little bit of difficulty with, I would say, straying on the same path, mostly because his camera angle is a little bit wider than most runners, so he does get a chance to see more of the battlefield. But the thing is that he actually auto-locks to more things than other runners normally would, because the camera is so wide. You actually see the enemy for longer, which is not necessarily what we want.
Map data, huh? It's hard to get an
But
accurate
very
picture
quickly
of the
here
area.
on Fullest's
Our satellite
screen,
resolution
clipping
isn't so
out
high.
at the desert
Hopefully we
camp
deploy some new satellites
to
soon.
make his way out to the greater desert area, after having bought a couple things from the vendor in the desert camp, just a couple health items and offensive buffs, as well as some animal baits and a chip that we will be needing later that will basically enable us to have a little bit of hyper armor, so long as our health is
Who opens a
at
sealed gate
greater
with
than
explosives?
80%.
There's gotta be an easier way, right?
But again, also going out of bounds in this sort of tunnel area and dashing along the side here is rather scary, because you can relatively easily fall off. And a lot of this is down to some of the techniques that Fullest uses, although both runners here have this down pretty well. Fullest not opting to sandslide in on one of those dunes there. Understandable. I know some of the gains that he gets from that sandslide is not necessarily the greatest. I guess opting to just simply dash swing through some of the slower sandslides is still an option. Are the buffs good at all in casual play? Yes, they are, actually. They're quite helpful. They are actually quite helpful, especially in some of the later parts as well with the defensive buffs. We will be seeing both runners pick up offensive buffs and defensive buffs later on, about midway through the run, but at least for now, we only have offensive buffs. That was a little bit of a weird setup there for Fullest. He was looking to plunge onto the slippery rocks on his side there at the correct time when the machine plunges down into the sand. That would have enabled him to basically be directly next to the cutscene trigger there, just sort of easy displacements between him and the next trigger ahead of him, but nice little sand slide after that cutscene, moving into the desert housing area. And this skip is really sort of interesting because it showcases how some of the out of bounds in this game are really sort of wonky, in that the apartment buildings are really just... That was an interesting walk into the cutscene from Marbles, but essentially Fullest has clipped out of bounds into this apartment building area and has navigated his way to the Atom Pit, but he needs one of the triggers out in... It's somewhere in the mess of buildings, and he's managed to get the trigger that he needs, as well as landing on the platform as well. It looked like Fullest got platformless, which entails getting the trigger and getting the platform trigger all in one motion, but also not getting the or having to stand on the platform in order to get the platform trigger, which is a very tricky sort of maneuver, but we'll see Marbles also attempt this as well, grabbing the trigger required for the rest of the fight to take place. And for a split second there, it looked as if Marbles was going to miss the platform trigger, but fortunately he did not either. So both runners going head first into the pit fight here. You will actually notice that both runners ended up swapping over their weapon sets. That's so that way we can take advantage of one damage glitch being thrown. So we can throw one damage glitch, we can actually swap our weapon sets and throw out another damage glitch. And we'll see that done on basically every boss fight that we see from here on out. It is a very, very good technique to be using on every single one of these fights. And we'll definitely see that come into play on these boss fights here. We do actually need a good amount of damage being thrown out on some of these fights here, as we could see Fullest actually skipping one of the boss phases, which is very, very handy. Although getting hit there by one of Adam's attacks is not really what he was looking for, but still transitioning the boss quite quickly. Overall, a relatively good fight on the front half and the back half of the Adam fight. We'll see if Marbles has any good luck in that fight as well, but overall, very clean fight. As a 28-19 or so Adam kill. That was a very nice desert area for Fullest. Unfortunately, Marbles a little bit farther behind, but not too much farther. Adam being a little bit of slow boy there, unfortunately, because how Adam actually reacts to some of your attacks, he will just sort of stand there if you're a little unlucky, and it really has plagued a good number of runners as well. Although once Adam gets back down to the ground, it's really just a matter of DPSing him down and hoping that he doesn't do any attacks that make him invulnerable. Now, the trick that Fullest is lining up to do here, he's pushed the box enough so that way he can pod launch and dash immediately to the left to cancel the pod launch midway through and actually clip him out of the box area. But wow, he's having a lot of difficulty there. in order to clip out. Usually Fullest gets that first try, but it looks like he choked a little bit there. That actually put Marbles a little bit farther ahead, or a little bit closer to Fullest there. Having nerves there is a little bit of a time loss, but we'll see what it really comes down to. I know Marbles might be attempting to do something a little bit special in the amusement park area, but we'll see how that ends up playing out for both runners here tonight.
Maybe we should...
No.
Marbles also getting the clip out in the stupid box.
Operator to
It is
9
very
out.
much a stupid
Data
box,
upload
although
complete.
Marbles does need to be careful that he does not get
Message from the commander.
the
Initiating playback.
dialogue that exists at the mouth of the cave. That actually enables us to
We've lost contact with several Yorha units
save
that
the
were on their way
game
to the
and
surface.
reload the game,
Their
so
black
that way
boxes
we
are
actually
online,
displace
so we presume
ourselves
they're
closer
still
to the
alive.
exit
We've
of
tracked the
the
location
desert
of the
area.
So I need all Yorha units on the surface to head over and investigate. End transmission.
I heard something about that back at the resistance camp.
Target location confirmed. I'm worried about the other androids. We should probably check this out as soon as... Looks like our surface...
Forgive
routes
me
cut
as
off.
my throat is
So
really
to be,
sore.
those machines out in the desert look just like androids, right?
Right.
But both runners here
Androids
making
were
their way
robots without
into
human
the
creators.
amusement
So
park
why do the
area
machines try to
here.
look like us?
There's no point trying to work out
And
unsolvable problems.
one of the first couple tricks that we do in the amusement park area is really just skipping over the discovery cutscene that exists at one of these trees. We can do a double lift and a high jump to just go over it, and that would save us a handful of seconds. And
This is weird.
at least for me, I know I still mess that up sometimes. But both runners will be looking to do a skip known as Let's Play here, basically traversing the amusement park area very, very quickly here, climbing out at one of these buildings here, as we can see on Fullest's perspective, but not so lucky there. He did... Oh, actually quite lucky. He actually voided out and respawned back on the opposite side of the amusement park area. There is a bit of a chasm there that exists where you could either void out to the bottom of the map or the game replaces you on solid ground. And to my knowledge, I believe we'll be seeing something different here from Marbles
Analysis.
as Fullest makes his way onto the roller coaster, using the very safe strategy that we've seen countless times from other runners, but I believe Marbles will be attempting a newer trick here known as auto-scroller coaster here. What Marbles is going to be doing is hopping onto the tracks there and grabbing one of the triggers at the very beginning of the roller coaster section, and
What do you think?
he's going to step off the tracks there just enough so that way he can call the roller coaster, and he's going to aim... Wow, nice. He's going to aim to clip off of the roller coaster at precisely the right time and at the right height, so that way he can basically cause the roller coaster to start moving without him actually being on it. And we'll see if Marbles actually did end up getting the correct triggers, because it is a little bit difficult in some cases to actually execute that properly, but that should at least internally put Marbles a little bit farther ahead of Fullest there, although in terms of XP, Marbles will have a little bit more XP than Fullest will, and it might just come down to that in terms of
What the
how this
hell?
race goes, but there's also the factor of if Marbles had messed the trick up or not. We'll have to see in a little bit here. I'm trying to keep my eye on the roller coaster. Very nice. Awesome job from Marbles. Actually getting all the triggers there. That is quite hype. Both of these runners not too far ahead, or not too far between each other, but Fullest still has a good lead over Marbles there. Very nice execution from Marbles on auto-scroller coaster skip there. That could have been pretty catastrophic if Marbles did not get the triggers,
Are we seriously
but
being attacked
fortunately
by dead
pulling it out
Wait,
just in time.
2B. I'm detecting black box signals.
So Beauvoir is a boss that I have not touched on yet, and she is an amazing boss fight to do casually, but unfortunately she is a bit of a pain in the speedrun, mostly because we don't really get to see any of her mechanics at all. The only mechanics that we really do get to see are these bodies phases on these crucifixes. They can be really mean if they actually hit you with anything, but fortunately Fullest not getting hit by anything. I wouldn't really say for little benefit. The amount of XP that you do actually get from the tank that Marbles had killed does put him a little bit ahead in terms of XP, and that might do him a little bit better than he actually thinks.
So,
Although if Fullest is also lucky in getting a higher level sword later on in the run, that could potentially swing it back into Fullest's favor
yeah,
for the later half of the run. But going into the final damage section from Beauvoir, both runners opting to self-destruct there at the conclusion of the Beauvoir fight that will essentially keep them on 1 HP later on, or for the duration of the time that they're sort of moving between these different areas here. And that's going to be important for a little bit of a movement technique that they're going to do between the Resistance Camp and Pascal's Village. But although another strategy that Marbles could have done with the roller coaster trick was to pick up a spear and do a technique known as spear dashing,
but no one knows for sure.
which surprisingly saves a good amount of time, as world record holder Canaris has proved in his most recent world record,
They all have white flags.
which is pretty bonkers to me, but although Marbles unfortunately not taking advantage of that possible time save due to his customized controls not being very conducive for spear dashing, unfortunately. But at least on Fullest's perspective here, he's going to be aiming to go to the Resistance Camp now that he's talked with Pascal. But the thing is that he actually needed to save in Pascal's village, and the reason why that's important is because once he actually dies in the Resistance Camp,
To be here.
he actually will respawn back in Pascal's village. But the trick is that our main quest progress actually stays with us, which is sort of interesting in that we can really make a quick journey over to the Resistance Camp using a small bore, as we see on Fullest's perspective, hopping to Resistance Camp, and once we actually collect the item we need from an enemy in the Resistance Camp, we can actually just kill ourselves using the boar and be sent immediately back to Pascal's village, which is a very handy time save indeed. Otherwise, we would have had to run all the way back to Pascal's village, and that's not very fast, is it? And unfortunately, on Marble's perspective, we did not get a boar. Surprisingly, boar hopping, as we had seen from Fullest, is ever so slightly faster than the boar's actual sprint animation. And Moose, unfortunately, just trudging along at a sprint speed. But that will put a good amount of time save there ahead in Fullest's court, mostly because one technique that I know Marbles has been slow to adopt is clipping through the box that we have to otherwise push in the fence for Pascal's village. That box itself can actually be clipped through, as we had seen from Fullest's perspective, but unfortunately Marbles going around the building to its right and swinging around is ever so slightly slower, actually.
So let's get going.
Mostly because the dialogue there can just be cancelled simply by accessing the door. So, Fullest has definitely pulled out a little bit ahead. I'd probably say about a minute or so, but that might change going into this next section here ahead for Fullest. What he's going to be looking to do is really just skip the first angles fight here. Under normal circumstances, you would actually have to fight both Engels machines here in the city ruins, but we're not about that life. We really don't want to bother with fighting the first Engels, mostly because it's prologue RNG all over again, but very conveniently we can actually do two strategies there to skip the fight, where one strategy involves either hopping through this tiny little hole that exists between the actual building itself and the invisible wall that spawns in for the fight. And unfortunately, Fullest did not get that, so he's going to have to do the recovery. Sorry. Fullest is going to have to do the recovery very narrowly falling off, or saving himself from falling off the bridge there. That would have been pretty catastrophic for Fullest there if he did end up messing that up. But fortunately, he did save it and pull it through as he had jumped over the invisible wall. Because, well, Platinum, I guess somebody, never really anticipated the players to gain enough height to actually scale that invisible wall and escape the fight. Almost conveniently, as most of us would argue. And we will be seeing a similar sort of phenomenon happen later on. Oof.
This is your commander. For the first time in centuries, we've intercepted a signal belonging
But
to
we'll see if Fullest
that are
here
in
does
direct
actually
command
get the
of the
materials that he
machine life forms on
needs
this planet.
for
If we
a
can
higher
destroy
level
them,
sword.
we can end this long and arduous war.
Conveniently, some of the items that we need for that higher level sword do actually come out of some of these drops in the cave system area here as world drops, as well as some of the drops that the enemies give, and we'll be seeing how Fullest pulls that off a little bit later from now, but not too much later. Going into the negotiations fight here is sort of an important moment in the story, but not necessarily important for us. Oof, Marble's losing a little bit of time there dash swinging across one of those routes is a little bit scary because, at least given his camera angle is a little bit wider, so unfortunately auto lock on does cause 2B to sort of swing in a given direction closer to the machine that she's locked on to, and really not in our best interest for displacing ourselves closer to where we actually want to be. But you can see on Fullest's perspective, good usage of pod slow-mo, as we call it, to slow down Eve's attacks enough so that way we can actually kill the boss pretty dang quickly. with very minimal dodging effort, although Fullest getting hit there by one of Eve's attacks, but fortunately, Fullest doesn't really care about the rest of that fight. Once he's killed the boss once, he can still continue to fight the boss, but he's not interested in that at all, so what he's going to do is basically escape the arena, using the same logic as we did for the Engels fight as we had seen earlier. He's really just skipping over the invisible wall that exists for that arena, mostly because reasons. I guess the developers never really anticipated the player to get that much height. However, we can, which is very, very nice and very satisfying as well, I might add. Getting a jump that high is very handy, and Fullest does need to make sure that he has killed enough of these enemies so that way he can dash swing through. Wow, a couple hidden enemies in the wall there. Some would argue walls are merely suggestions for both androids and machines alike.
What a pain.
Stop complaining.
Yeah.
But Fullest is really sort of rocketing along here, but Marbles is holding a little steady behind, but I'm not too certain on how much time save Marbles really has in comparison to Fullest here. Marbles really has to pull it out for a good fight for the rest of these fights here. Otherwise, this time gap between these two runners might actually get larger and larger. I'd still wager about a minute and a half between the two at this point. I'd say closer to a minute. Although it did seem like both runners were opting to not even bother picking up the world drops, counter to what I was saying, but I believe Fullest did attempt to pick up some of the materials that he needs for a higher level sword, and we'll see the results of that a little bit later. We did see a quick little dialogue skip there in the bunker from Fullest, entering a dialogue with a partner's dialogue open at the same time. Basically enables it so we can skip a block of dialogue that exists in the world by basically canceling the two out with each other, which is very handy. It speeds up a couple of these segments here. Also, that was an interesting interaction that Marbles got when talking to Commander. He instantly started talking to her. So now that Fullest and Marbles are heading their way out to Pascal's village, they are going to be looking to get rid of their small buffs that they've been using this whole time. They're going to sell some items to get a lot more cash, and sell some of their HUD elements. Fullest, I know, opts to mostly go for strictly offensive buffs, but I did not get a chance to catch what critical chips or offensive chips that Fullest had. We'll get a chance to see what Marbles had at that, but ooh, unfortunate. Fullest did not get enough height over the mum skip cutscene trigger there. That did cost him a handful of seconds, I'd say, but definitely not what he was looking for. It looked as if he had enough height, but he might have lost it a little bit based off of where he began his lift.
Man, this job can be pretty rough sometimes, huh?
Unfortunately, a little bit of a time loss there for Fullest, but we'll see if Marbles is able to capitalize on that.
I think some of us are better at that than others.
I believe Marbles sold one too many of those HUD elements, but I might be wrong on that. I know Marbles does actually opt to buy defensive buffs in comparison to Fullest's strict offensive buffs. That's going to make Marbles' gameplay a little bit safer in the long run, mostly because so long as he has his defensive buffs active, he doesn't really need to worry about getting onto low HP, although It is
Check this guy.
marginally slower for each fight to be having to apply 4 buffs in comparison to just strictly 2 buffs. And we'll get a chance here to see what Fullest's chips are. He's going to equip a chip known as Resilience, and I believe those were 2 weapon attack ups, considering that those were the only 2 in the list. That I might be correct on that.
Just ahead.
The Resilience chip, as I had mentioned earlier, is going to make it so that way his health, so long as it's at 80% or higher, can make it so that way he gets hyper armor, and not being staggered is definitely going to help him for one of these fights upcoming in the castle.
I'm
But
aware of how to fight. You just be careful.
we'll have to see what Marbles' chips here are going to be. I know, if I am correct on Fullest's weapon attack up chips, then okay, interesting there. For Marbles, he got 2 critical plus 0s, I believe. That is going to help Marbles in
How are we supposed to
some of these fights here if he is lucky, but those crit chips might be a little bit unforgiving because given the nature of crits here, they deal a lot of damage, but the unfortunate thing is that they do not happen very often with low percent chances, which is not really something he was looking for, but can still make a difference in some of these fights here. Fullest doing a really nice long jump there to cross the chasm between the castle and the mainland. Rainbow Road, as we call it, skipping over a previously named skip called Mario Kart. But that long jump definitely saves a little bit of time over the older strategy, but should not be too much of an issue for either of these runners, as Fullest makes his way and climbs the forest castle. Very convenient that we are able to actually climb that area very effectively, and we'll see Marbles also attempt to go for Rainbow Road as well. But the fight that Fullest has ahead of him right now is a bit of a tricky one, mostly because A2's attacks can be very mean in depending on what RNG Fullest actually gets out of her. He's basically going to be hoping that he takes her down as fast as possible. Obviously, the more attacks that she dishes out, the more, or the longer the fight actually takes. Immediately getting 1 dash, that's a little unfortunate for Fullest, but he's still going to be able to damage her down a good amount. Going in for another dash, he knows exactly where A2 is going to be dropping down, which is very handy. I might actually take that back. Fullest might have a couple crit chips on that, if I'm not mistaken. But very convenient as well. Instead of having to jump out the window after A2, we can really just escape the arena out through the back area by doing a high jump over the invisible wall and plunging through the dialogue that would otherwise have to be walked back into the arena. It's very handy because that skip basically skips over like 2.5 minutes of dialogue. It's a really long dialogue sequence that we would otherwise have to listen to if we jumped out that window.
It'll be fast.
But if I'm not mistaken here, both runners should basically be comparable in terms of, or basically equal in terms of the amount of damage that they dish out now. I unfortunately was not paying too much attention to which chips that they had equipped, but I know Marbles does have critical chips. However, Fullest may or may not have a critical chip in there. We'll have to see going into this next longer area, or longer section, I should say. It's almost time for everybody's favorite part. I know in this part of the run, I'm usually focused on just closing out the run, mostly because Groon is not very entertaining, I like to say, but at least the parts leading up to it and after it are quite entertaining at that. Fullest clipping out on one of those boxes there in the Resistance camp and actually making his way to the back area of the Resistance camp and plunging down to the beginning of the Flooded City area, just enough so that way he can collect one of the triggers that he needs from the Flooded City. But he's also going to void out. That replaces him back at the top of the Resistance camp area and allows him to basically plunge down to the back end of the Flooded City, directly to the area that he needs to be going to complete the main quest and continue the story, which is very handy because it really saves on having to make your way across the sunken buildings in the Flooded City, and makes things very, very fast for runners, and really sort of showcases how closely knit the areas are. I definitely liked that skip because of how close the Flooded City and Resistance Camp actually end up being, whereas casually you would never really expect them to be super, super close. But Fullest making his way into the flight unit and starting a very long shmup sequence, but unfortunately we will have both runners in the same sequence at basically the same time. Not too far behind is Marbles, but he is going to have a little bit of difficulty on that plunge. Oh, actually quite nice. Some runners do actually have difficulty with plunging back down to the latter half of the Flooded City area, mostly because the drowning area can be sometimes finicky in loading in time. I know on console it's a little bit slower to load in comparison to being on PC. But get your resident sleepers or sleeping accommodations up in chat because it's time for Groon. Oh boy, if anybody has any questions in chat, please feel free to throw them out or grab a coffee or something, and I'll try to answer some at that, because basically for the next I guess like 10 minutes or something, we definitely have a good amount of time to just talk about life and well, where we are as a society, because honestly there's way better things to be talking about than Groon right now. Did either runner do crane skip? Unfortunately, no. I was kind of hoping that both Marbles and Fullest were going to do it, but unfortunately they did not. I'm gonna go finish B. It was super fun to watch. Well, thank you. Thank you for stopping by, Jax. Of course, this to this game and this sort of stand out as sort of an interesting thing in terms of the storytelling that Yoko Taro and the team at Platinum designed for this game, and that the different playthroughs really sort of lead from one into the other, offering more story for each major ending. But that's all I'm going to say on that. I really don't want to spoil anything. And if you have not checked out this game, even just casually, it is very fun and very thought-provoking, I'd say, at least. A lot of the themes that go over, that this game goes over, is definitely interesting from a casual perspective, as well as some of the tech that we use in the speedrun is definitely very fun at that to use.
If it's that big, we should be able to see it.
Now, unfortunately, between the different loading timers here, we will actually see both runners' timers at a little bit of a difference here, mostly because of how the loadless times work this is essentially a race to the finish, in that the timers might not reflect each runner's performance at the moment, but will definitely reflect on it once the run comes to a close. But right now, Marbles is a little bit behind Fullest, as Fullest is going full swing into the Gruden section, but if there's anything you guys want to know in chat, definitely throw it out there.
Proposal. Destroy the generator quickly.
As I continue to ramble on about the tournament. For those of you who are unaware, we've been running this tournament for the past couple weeks, which has definitely been pretty fun and entertaining to watch each of these runners go through both round 1, and we're about halfway through round 2 of this tournament. This is part of the doubles elimination section of the run. I believe this is round 3 of the winners bracket. I should have mentioned that at the very beginning, but both of these runners tonight, one of these runners tonight will be moving on in the winners bracket, but the other one might be dropping to the losers bracket as the result of this match. But overall, very close races towards the end of this tournament here, which is very, very nice. Uni says that Crane Skip Skip was impossible with FAR. Surprisingly, no. I believe somebody did actually manage to find a clip out in Prologue that allows you to do the same clip, it's just at a different location, and may or may not be a little bit slower than the initially designed clip. At least that's the story that I know.
Electromagnetic interference eliminated. Preparing for satellite laser strike.
It is actually quite swaggy to watch, mostly because Crane Skip has been such an integral part in Prologue for so long that I honestly thought that it was impossible to get rid of it, but we've managed to skip over a trick like that.
I'm the commanding officer, 4B. Don't worry, we'll take it from here.
Yeah, like what Game Commander is saying, it's just in a different location than was initially shown by Wishang in his video.
We've got mortars lining the shoreline here.
But Fullest basically halfway through this section here. Unfortunately, Marble's having a little bit of bad RNG, but nothing that he can.
I'll help aim.
Yeah. And
This thing's armor is too thick. We need more
cause
firepower.
her damage to be a little bit skewed on some of those fights, but
Direct? Oh, right.
That's right. Lay down some fire in its stupid mouth.
I'm actually quite interested in how I believe both runners towards the end of this match might actually do a trick on the final boss. I'm kind of hoping. I'm really hoping that either runner does the self-destruct strategy on Eve at the very, very, very end of the run, though we'll still have to see the results of that. Although, I don't quite know what the pace of that Fullest is on right now. He might be a...
Hey, 2B, I think I have another idea. You keep that thing right where it is, okay?
What?
Please, 2B, this is gonna work.
is leaving the front line.
That's actually a good observation, Unity. I do quite wonder if they do the high jump that was
He has a plan.
shown off in the Jeep Factory. I'm not too certain if either runner really goes for the trick known as Shabu Skip, which really boggles my mind because how do you skip Shabu? Ooh, unfortunately Marvel's actually actually missing one of those first shots on Grun. No, second shots, sorry. That was quite unfortunate and a little bit of RNG on Grun's section. A little bit of RNG there from Grun, unfortunately putting Marbles a little bit farther behind, but we'll see if he's able to pull it out from there. But I'm actually kind of confident that Fullest manages to just high jump over that area, and I'm confident Marbles is as that they didn't make in like every location, which is really sort of silly when you come to think of it, because well, the name of the game for this in particular is really that the game has been thoroughly QA'd by countless hardworking people that seem to have missed things along the way, and we'll just put it under the blanket of QA'd by the way. But Fullest is nearing the end of Grun here, thank God, but unfortunately not at the very end just yet. Marbles is making his way out to Core 2, as Fullest is making his way up to Core 3. But hopefully neither of these cores here give the runners bad RNG, but I know if I say that, then it will. I'm sorry in advance. I think the one thing that I do enjoy in this section in particular is really just how the music sort of crescendos as... Oh my god. Of course Fullest gets bad RNG as I say that. Okay, so judging from Fullest's timer, he is a little bit behind his PB. I believe that's comparing against his PB, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But a little bit of bad RNG there from Fullest. We'll see if Marbles gets any better RNG on Core 3. But finally, Fullest is out of Grun. We'll be attempting to see a good amount of tech from these runners here in the latter half of the game now, as we basically make it into the last couple sections. Conveniently, you can actually drown in some of those areas in the flooded city to actually put us a little bit farther ahead, although Fullest is missing some of the... A little bit more time. Unfortunate that I'm slightly triggered. Rip the beelines, but unfortunately Fullest is going to have to do the very precise clip out known as Copied City clip in the tunnel here. I believe Fullest still uses keyboard and mouse to find this lineup there. Third try on the clip out. Not too bad, but still cost him a couple seconds to find the correct angle in clipping out. That is a relatively precise clip that has definitely caused a good number of fatalities on most runs. from runners here, but full. As Marbles also exits Groon.
What is this?
Unfortunately, that we do have
What's with the
a
corpses?
little bit more of a time difference than easy runners, but hopefully Marbles will be able to.
I or we.
Further, although Fullest really does need to
Interest in humanity.
really does need to flop on some of these tricks in order for Marbles to really make up that amount of time, but Fullest is really sort of steamrolling here along in these different clips. I believe, though, a second or third try mansplaining, and that will enable him to basically escape the arena and run back towards the elevator that he came from and activate it. The reason why is because we actually get to use a dialogue from or a line of dialogue from the elevator if we enter it very briefly and then exit it. Oof, wow. That was a long load time for Marbles.
I know. Let's move.
It took a little bit of time for Marbles to find the right angle there on Copied City clip, but still, overall, pretty good. It did take a couple seconds there for the elevator to appear for Marbles, but also Fullest not losing any time, if at all, on mansplaining, which is very, very nice and handy going into the actual boss fight itself.
To find 9S.
He does need to just trigger a dialogue sequence there from 2B at a certain HP threshold, but for the remainder of these damage sections, he really just needs to take the boss down as quickly as possible. And I know Fullest does make very good use of strictly just damage glitching and throwing out both of his swords there. Wow, that was an interesting clip out from Marbles. Sort of sliding along the top of that box there and still making it out of bounds is quite lucky there. Very quickly there from Fullest. Wow, he caught the supply trader just in time to cancel that pod's dialogue.
Analyze current trends
Very
in the
nice
machines.
there
Huh.
from
Something
Fullest,
tells
but
me
he was
this
able
is
to
going to involve
cancel
a lot of
a
killing.
good number of dialogue sections there. Initially when talking to an enemy, and then
I
talking
suppose
with
he might know
the
something.
computer
Pascal,
girl,
can you hear me?
and actually jumping over the trigger for one of the dialogue sections. Really
I need to know if you've
did a
seen
good
any
number
trends or
on some of
pages
those
about
dialogue
machines.
sections, really speeding up
Trends?
things and having him not have to
2 days
wait
ago, I was
for
contacted
much
by
of
some
this
machinists that
dialogue,
just
although the only
presented
thing that he is
themselves
going to
to
have to wait
They
for
wanted to discuss a peace
is
treaty.
No kidding.
2B's walk
They're seeking to form an
with
alliance
Pascal
with
towards the
our
end,
village.
If that's what they
or
want,
towards the
what'll they
beginning
do
of the
then?
factory
I believe
area
they're
here.
working on building a colony of their own.
Marbles
You don't say.
also not losing too much time on mansplaining, although he does need to be careful on
Please.
the
I was
actual
actually planning to go speak with them
Adam fight
myself,
itself,
Maybe we can meet up over there?
Sounds good.
as Adam is really sort of a mean boy in terms of which attacks he ends up choosing. Oof. Unfortunately, Adam choosing to teleport a little bit all over the place, but that was pretty lucky for Marbles as well. Getting good damage on on Adam is actually quite difficult.
Can be rather unpredictable.
Even you?
In truth, yes. Now that we're cut off from the network, we no longer share data.
No, Unity. Unfortunately, neither runner has Virtuous Contract level 3. Both of them have just simply a level 2 sword.
Does.
But at least for now, it's just a little bit of waiting here on full screen. Really just waiting for the priest Mook to move into position to call the elevator is really just sort of a waiting game, as Fullest shows off a little bit of swag for all endings. I don't believe he got enough height there. I know that trick that Fullest is showing off is a very precise high jump as well in terms of the attacks that he wishes to do. But we are nearing the latter half, or I should say the end of A ending pretty soon here. This run does only go through the first major ending known as A ending. Probably for the better as well, because at least in all major endings, the first 5 major endings really is a much longer run, and unfortunately for this tournament setting, the most popular category is actually just A ending itself.
My name is Pascal. I'm here to discuss the...
Do these runners have Twitch channels? Yes, they do. !R, I believe, is the command.
Damn it.
If it's working.
It is shady. Fascinating,
I don't think it's working.
I've never seen machines
But it should be that command !R for the runner's Twitch channels. If not, twitch.tv/fullest_ and twitch.tv/MarbleSoda.
Let's check it out.
Both very awesome people as well. One of the things to point out on Fullest's perspective here is that he ended up clipping out of the Mook's room, as we call it, with all those machines falling from the ceiling, and he actually managed so that way he didn't have to kill a single one to get the elevator to spawn. That's really helpful for his case. And also getting a very fast clip out in 9S room at that. That is very handy for Fullest. Rocketing ahead into the deep factory area. Both those clips are relatively difficult to pull off, but given the right angle and given enough practice there, he really has got this down here. Although Fullest is looking to basically clear out the deep factory area once and for all here with this trick, and basically being at a very high position in the deep factory, he's able to basically jump down to any position he wants, and what he got there from falling down was one of the required triggers he needs to progress in the deep factory area. And that basically cuts out a good minute 45 from the deep factory area in itself, which is a very, very hefty skip found by Marky, our beloved and resident glitch hunter. But Fullest essentially got the trigger that he needed from one half of the deep factory area, respawned back up in this really tall, or really high up room, and plunged all the way back down to the end of the deep factory area, closing it out in very quick succession. So, making his way into the Soshi fight, he really just has a little bit of a waiting period. Most runners do like to hang out on this bridge here instead of having to wait for the boss on foot. We really just sort of keep the boss in one position. Now, Marbles is also going to be looking to do the deep factory skip himself, although it looks like he's having a little bit of difficulty on one of the clip outs there. There are multiple different ways of getting this clip out in 9S room. It looks like he got it with a pod launch, which is very handy. Although there's, I think, like 7 or 10 different ways of clipping out of that room, which is very handy. But Marbles will be aiming to get one of those triggers in the middle area of the deep factory once he's clipped out of this room. Fullest really just opting to damage down Soshi as quickly as he possibly can. He is making good use of his slow-mo because his chips are not exactly that great in terms of their actual damage output, but very nice. Didn't get a single attack out of Soshi. Oof, unfortunately Marbles did not get the dialogue trigger he needed, so he's going to have to try again there. Oof, it looks like he overshot that a little bit. Oh my god, very close respawn there from Marbles. He got the dialogue trigger he needed, but he was almost back in bounds, which is very, very scary. Although he was able to close out Deep Factory Skip very nicely there. Although I'm not too certain if Marbles will be able to close this out in time before Fullest. Fullest really has to fail considerably on some of these tricks, but also using a little bit of new tech from Wish Sang. Jumping over the fence there on one of those catwalks is ever so slightly faster than doing an alternative technique. But you might also remember that this factory out-of-bounds area is very reminiscent of the prologue area. Very convenient that the beginning and ends of the A-ending run sort of go through the same areas. Although Fullest does have a good amount of boss fights ahead of him to close out the run just yet. Oof, looks like he wasted a dash there on some of that movement. He would have been able to plunge down that staircase for a little bit faster movement, but unfortunate. Marble's making his way into the Soshi fight, just waiting for the music trigger to happen. Unfortunately, the boss is just invulnerable until that music trigger happens, so we just wait. Most runners do like to hang out while just waiting for the boss. And timing it so that way, once the boss is targetable, they begin their damage on the boss itself.
Why are their numbers increasing like this?
Cause unknown.
Try contacting the bunker via laser relay system.
Affirmative.
That was sort of an interesting attack that we saw from Marbles there. So she actually managed to get out the sort of exploding machines that he spawns in. Those can be a little bit risky there. But Fullest making his way into the burning resistance camp. That was a little bit of a weird first damage glitch into the background, but we'll take it. He's still going to be aiming to dispatch these enemies as quickly as possible, but the thing is that he needs to be careful on where he positions himself, because for whatever reason, if you damage these stubbies too quickly, there's one right behind him. They do actually respawn, or well, not respawn, but they spawn in their counterparts that are supposed to spawn in later, actually behind him, because he's damaged them so fast and so quickly, he's moved up too far. So his positioning was a little bit wonky there on dispatching those stubbies as quickly as he possibly can. We also saw on Marble's perspective there, jumping over the fence on the catwalk, that is very swaggy and saving just a couple seconds in comparison to running around. Some of those staircases can actually be a little annoying there, but Fullest making his way into Bokushi. Fortunately, the electricity did not give Fullest too much of a difficulty there. I know sometimes the damage that Bokushi does to the player and the electricity at the same time can be a little bit annoying, but the boss, unfortunately, rolling around, and instead of doing the vacuum attack, not really what Fullest would have wanted there, but he still gets the self-destruct off in time. I believe that was level 18 for Fullest. Marbles might be ever so slightly ahead in terms of XP, but that XP that he got earlier in the run from the amusement park tank might not be able to save him here. If anything, he'll get maybe... Oh my god. Fullest opting to take a quick break and fish.
They're still coming?
But Fullest is definitely sitting pretty here with the amount of time save that he has accumulated in over Marbles,
Pascal?
Fullest would have to do something pretty catastrophic in his run in order for Marbles to make up that amount of time at this late in the run. I'd say Fullest has maybe about 4 or 5 minutes or so left in the run. Hopefully 125 question mark? No, 120, sorry, 128 something? I'm not going to speculate that just now, but at least in terms of Fullest's performance tonight is definitely leaning to be pretty powerful. I'm confident. But Fullest clearing out the enemies in front of Pascal's village there and dispatching Core 2 as quickly as he possibly can. He doesn't care about his camera position. He knows he's damaging the boss effectively as he possibly can. Unfortunately didn't get the dialogue skip there at the end of killing Core 2. That is going to cost him a couple seconds, because otherwise he would have been able to begin the Eve fight as quickly as he possibly can. Instead, now he has to wait for the dialogue to finish before he can spawn in Eve and continue the fight.
Everything must die!
And now that Fullest is fighting Eve, it's really just a matter of DPSing the boss down as quickly as he possibly can, making good use of his buffs, of his taunt, of his slow-mo in order to DPS the boss down as quickly as he possibly can. And looks like Marbles got a little bit of a bounce there from Bokushi, but was also able to get the self-destruct off. But being on low HP there is a little bit scary there, Marbles, but I think he's still confident in making his way out to the hill there. Surprisingly, you can actually dispatch Core 1 way faster if you pull him up onto the hill. Oh, unfortunate there for Fullest. He did not quite get enough slow-mo on Eve. That did put him back a couple seconds because of the nature of that second phase. What he was looking to do was actually slow down the boss enough in his healing animation, in that by the time the dialogue finished to the correct point, he would have had to basically slow down the fight and slow down the boss's healing enough so that way he could instantly transition to the next phase of the fight. But unfortunately, Fullest wasn't able to pull that out. But we'll see if Fullest is able to pull out a self-destruct here. It looks like he is level 19 or so, and he does actually get the self-destruct on Eve. That's going to save him a good amount of time on Phase 3 of Eve, because now he instantly transitions to Phase 4, dealing a good amount of damage to Eve in that self-destruct is very handy as well. And Marbles making his way into Core 2, but unfortunately Core 2 landing on the roof. He did actually get a good high jump and a crit there on Core 2, but unfortunate that it landed on the roof there, costing him a little bit more time than he would have wanted. But a very good run from Fullest there. I'm quite surprised that he got the self-destruct as well. Marbles, unfortunately, wasting a little bit of time there firing off a laser. But 126.50 for Fullest here. Marbles not too far behind right now.
Coming from a large number of latent machine life forms.
He's absorbing the life force of whatever's left on the network.
Damn it! We'll never get anywhere like this. I'm going to try hacking into Eve and shutting him down. Back me up, 2B!
On it. Protecting Unit 9S while he hacks the system.
The enemy is connected to a vast network. Enemy unit cut off from network functionality. Alert. NFCS destroyed. Close range combat no longer operable.
It's all because of you!
Alert. FFC.
I must have been corrupted when Eve detached from the network.
No.
It's okay. I can always reload my backup data from the bunker.
That was a very nice
But you'll lose
SD
you.
from
The you that
Marbles
exists
there.
this very
Very sorry I
moment.
was muted,
Guess so.
but
But we can't.
very strong
upload
to
this
the
corrupted
finish
data
for
to the
both
bunker.
runners here tonight.
So
129.33 for Marbles. Very nice indeed. Guys, what do you think about your runs tonight?
I got roller coaster.
Yeah, dude.
I didn't
I'm
break it.
quite surprised.
That's
Hot
pretty much the only thing I was
garbage.
happy with. My FPS never was above 55 that entire run, so I mean,
Yeah, I could kind of
surprised
see
I
that
was
on the
able to
restream.
I
Feels
was actually
bad.
surprised I could do some of the stuff I was doing. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, if I hadn't failed Eve Phase 2 skip, this would have PB'd, so that's kind of feels bad, man.
Yeah, I mean,
You had posted in
you'll
chat.
just get it.
16 seconds behind PV. That's pretty incredible. Although,
I
I
golded
think
like
next time.
4
Sorry, go
splits,
ahead.
2? 3 splits. So, not bad.
Yeah, this run for me was kind of all over. So, I got destroyed by RNG in prologue, which
Oh,
was
yeah,
terrible.
punches feels
punched.
bad, man.
I got punches and angles used laser right in the end of the dialogue. So
Oh,
somehow it was still sub 15, but not very good. Desert was terrible. Amusement park wasn't bad, but it's just kind of like really little time saves and they start adding up. And then, of course, in a run like this, I get first try copied city. But my game is so busted, the elevator took like 5 seconds to load. So
Oh,
I'm really
no.
surprised at that. I'm really surprised at that. Why it took so long.
yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my game. I don't think it's the game as much as it is my hardware is dying on me. So
feels bad, man.
hopefully when I upgrade my storage, I'll be able to run it again. But as it is now, I'd have like, I mean, it's fine. I'm actually happy that I lost because now I can just drop out and not feel bad.
I'm
Actually,
excited
one
to
thing that-
see your return.
Actually, one thing that Kanaris is pointing out in chat is that you did actually get fast commander dialogue
I did.
after negotiations, which I'm really quite surprised that that's crept back in, because we thought that it was sort of a different. I'm not too sure what the interaction is. Either the slower load actually makes that more consistent. Because I think that's also consistent on my Xbox version of the game as well.
yeah.
Xbox Omega lol.
Oh, interesting.
Weird how a slower load would actually help.
For one thing.
For one thing.
No,
at least
yeah.
it does something cool.
This game's weird. Yeah, I mean, this run was actually not that bad, but I lost 27 seconds to Desert Save Scum, so that was horrendous. And let's see, I also lost. What is this split? Oh, I lost like 15 seconds to failing mom skip and doing slow buys in the Pascal's village. Oof. And then, of course, the 20-ish seconds from failing Eve Phase 2 skip. So remove that spaghetti and this would have been sub 126 though.
Nice.
Man.
I'm telling you though. I've been telling you for a while. I'm like, man, if you would just run a ending.
If I
of just
would.
spending all your time in either
Play a
casual
long
games or
category.
other categories.
Cat.
Yeah, if you would just run a ending like I do, like I did rather,
Did.
you would easily be faster than me. And I've been saying that for a while, and you don't believe it, but
I don't believe it either.
I don't believe it either.
you could beat my time, trust me. My time isn't good.
Ooh. What's your sum of best right now, Marbles?
On my race splits, it's 123.41. I think on my actual splits, it's like high 122.
Monkas.
Go.
God
My
damn.
sum of best is 123.34 after today's golds. Marbles
I
does
didn't
not.
gold anything. I didn't gold anything, not even on my race splits.
You get for going in cold. Should have warmed up or something, man.
Nah, that's what I get when my game doesn't want to run. It's fine.
Man.
It's fine.
Rip.
I just need
Rip.
to upgrade. Easy fix.
But I think with that, we'll close out tonight. If either of you guys have anything else you want to add, I think I'll close out.
Nope.
Alright, so thank you to everybody who stopped by for today's race. Exclamation point NA for the rest of the tournament bracket for the double elimination half. Fullest will be moving on in the winners bracket, and Marbles will be moving on into the losers bracket as well. And for those of you who are interested in checking out either of these guys' Twitch channels, exclamation point R for both of these awesome guys. And if you are interested in learning NieR Automata as a speedrun, definitely check out our Discord, discord.nierspeedrun.com is where you will find everything related to A-ending, and as well as the other categories that we have available for this game. Definitely check it out. It's a blast. We highly recommend it. But I think with that, we'll close out. So, have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for watching.
.com is where you will find everything related to A-ending, and as well as the other categories that we have